The scratching started on the third night. Not the gentle gnawing of mice, but something deliberate, almost rhythmic, from the attic. It was the kind of sound that burrows into your mind long after the noise itself fades. Amelia had dismissed it at first, attributing it to the old house settling, or perhaps the wind playing tricks with loose shingles. But the house, an antique beauty perched on a forgotten lane, rarely whispered. It screamed. She'd inherited Blackwood Manor from a great-aunt she barely knew, a recluse named Evelyn who'd been found, quite peacefully, in her rose garden, a half-knitted scarf still clutched in her hands. The will was simple. The house and its contents to Amelia, no questions asked. A bittersweet inheritance for a struggling artist in a cramped city apartment. Blackwood Manor promised space, solitude, and a studio bathed in northern light. It delivered something far more insidious. The scratching grew bolder. Sometimes it sounded like fingernails dragging across wood, sometimes a soft, insistent tap, tap, tap. Amelia, a woman of science and logic, found herself increasingly unnerved. She tried to ignore it, to drown it out with classical music, but the sounds seemed to seep through the floorboards, through the very air, until they were all she could hear. Sleep became a luxury, replaced by restless nights spent staring at the ceiling, convinced something was moving just above her, watching. One particularly moonless night, the scratching intensified, morphing into a series of muffled thuds, as if something heavy was being dragged across the attic floor. Fear, cold and sharp, coiled in Amelia's stomach. She knew, with a certainty that chilled her to the bone, that this was no animal. This was something else, something human, armed with an antique lantern and a trembling resolve. Amelia climbed the narrow, creaking stairs to the attic. The air was thick with dust and the cloying scent of decay, a smell she hadn't noticed before, buried beneath the mustiness of old wood and forgotten things. The single bulb hanging from the rafters flickered, casting long, dancing shadows that twisted and writhed like specters. The attic was a labyrinth of forgotten furniture draped in white sheets, stacks of yellowed books, and trunks overflowing with relics from a bygone era. The source of the sound, however, was immediately apparent. In the center of the vast space, a section of the floorboards was newly disturbed, a faint trail of dust leading to a heavy, ornate trunk. It was unlike any other trunk in the attic, lacking the usual layers of grime and cobwebs. It looked recently opened. Amelia's heart hammered against her ribs. She remembered a casual remark from the lawyer handling the estate, something about Evelyn being quite the hoarder, and a vague mention of a locked room Evelyn had always kept secret. Could this be it? With trembling hands, she reached for the trunk. It wasn't locked. As she lifted the lid, a gasp caught in her throat. Inside, nestled amongst layers of ancient lace and silk, was a collection of meticulously arranged dolls. Not ordinary dolls, but porcelain figures with disturbingly lifelike eyes, each one dressed in period clothing. And each one had a single, delicate scarf tied around its neck, identical to the half-knitted scarf found with her great-aunt. A wave of nausea washed over Amelia. The scarves, the knitting, Evelyn's peaceful end. It all felt wrong. She picked up one of the dolls. Its eyes, a startling shade of blue, seemed to follow her. As she held it, she noticed a faint inscription on its tiny porcelain foot. Ilera. Taken, November 12th, 1928. Amelia's blood ran cold. She knew the names of her great-aunt's deceased sisters, one of whom had vanished without a trace in the late 1920s, a family tragedy never spoken of. The other dolls bore similar inscriptions, names and dates that corresponded to other local disappearances from decades past, cases that had baffled the police, bodies never found. The scratching sound started again, faint but distinct, coming from inside the trunk, from beneath the layers of lace. Amelia dropped the doll, her hands clammy with fear. Was it possible? Could something be alive in there? She recoiled, stumbling backwards, her mind racing. The peaceful death, the hidden room, the dolls, the scarves. Evelyn hadn't just been a hoarder. She was a collector, a curator of the vanished. And the scratching wasn't coming from inside the trunk, but from the dark space beneath it. A faint, almost imperceptible gap between the bottom of the trunk and the floor. As Amelia stared, horrified, a sliver of white, like a bone, slowly emerged from the gap. Then another, and another. Not bones, she realized with a shudder, but fingers. Long, skeletal fingers, slowly, painstakingly, pulling themselves from the darkness beneath the trunk. They flexed, as if testing the air, before reaching for the edge of the ornate container, their movements slow and deliberate, like a creature emerging from a long slumber. The attic light flickered, then died, plunging the space into absolute darkness. Only the faint glow of her lantern illuminated the horrific scene, and the scratching, now joined by a soft, wet slithering, was no longer coming from under the trunk, but from within it. A whisper, dry as rustling leaves, echoed through the silence. "You're home now, dear." Amelia didn't scream. She couldn't. Her breath hitched in her throat as she heard the distinct click of the trunk lid closing, plunging whatever horrors it contained back into its wooden confines. But the scratching continued, growing louder, more frantic, now accompanied by a rhythmic thudding against the inside of the trunk. It sounded like something was trying to get out, or perhaps like something was trying to get in. And then she heard it clearly, a soft, dry chuckle, closer than she could have imagined, right behind her. The scent of decay, sharp and overwhelming, filled her nostrils. She dropped the lantern, plunging the attic into utter blackness. The last thing she saw, reflected in the dying embers of the lantern's light, was the faint, unsettling glint of blue, porcelain eyes staring at her from the shadows.